What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Plant the Spear Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, and welcome to the show. Hopefully you guys are all doing well out there. Hopefully you're getting geared up for this weekend. Florida State returns back home to Doak to take on the Boston College Eagles at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. And I'm just ready for it. I'm ready to see Florida State back in Doak. It's supposed to be, right now they think it's going to be 70,000 plus, so it should be a nice crowd, some good weather. And just it's a winnable game for Florida State. Hopefully they can move to 4-0 and 2-0 in conference play, which, as we've seen this year, I mean, nothing's a gimme, so you definitely got to show up ready to play. This game does have an element of maybe trap to it because you're coming off of a gritty, tough win at Louisville, and you could potentially have your first ranked matchup in a while hosted in Doak Campbell next week if Wake Forest upsets Clemson, which I don't know that it's likely to happen, but it's certainly a possibility, especially with Sam Hartman back. So just something to keep our eye on there. But hopefully you guys are excited about the commitment we got earlier this week from a big-time prospect out of California for Florida State to land him. We're also got our eyes on something potentially coming Friday. Hopefully we get some good news then. But we got a pretty packed episode for you today. We're going to do the BC preview. We're also going to touch on some recruiting. Like I said, we just had a commitment and possibly another one coming up. It is a recruiting weekend for Florida State at the home game for BC. So we'll get right into the commitment. Blake Nichelson, 4-star linebacker out of Manteca, California. He is a top 150 player according to 247 Sports. He's the number 11 linebacker according to their rankings as well. He will, they haven't signed him yet, and I'm the type of person where, verbal commitments are nice. And it sounds like this kid's verbal commitment might be pretty solid, but it doesn't mean anything until ink hits the paper. But if they are to sign him, he will be the highest-rated linebacker signed since 2016, so that's nice. And you've just seen the improved linebacker play on the field this year, and it really makes you think, like, man, if we could just get this on a consistent basis, this defense could turn into something. And so this is the building block of that. You got to get these pieces in, and this is a good one to build around. So he does have some pretty good size, 6'2", 215. Obviously, he's got some more room to grow. He is a very athletic guy. He plays both ways for his high school team, and, really has some insane stats. Now, I don't know a whole lot about California high school football. I don't know the level of competition he's in or playing against, but, his stats speak for themselves. The guy's just... He's athletic as you can imagine. During his junior season last year, on defense, he had 49 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks. And to be honest, his offensive stats are really even more impressive. He does run the ball. He does catch the ball too. They do throw it to him. He had 2,231 yards rushing with 36 touchdowns, and another 381 yards receiving with 7 touchdowns. So, really, when you look at it, you might get more out of him than just a linebacker. He did mention during his commitment interview where he did enjoy seeing DJ Lundy line up at fullback and get a touchdown versus LSU in that game. And, initially when you saw that, because he did say that talking with the staff, they may have some packages where he can get involved in the offense and get some touches. And, at first when you saw DJ Lundy come in and score, you're like, well, that's interesting. That's cool. I like it. Go old school, bring the fullback back, give it to a linebacker. That's neat. Little did we know, Mike Norvell was out here playing 3D chess. He's out here showing Blake Nichelson that I can line you up at linebacker or I can give you the ball and let you score a touchdown. So, sometimes it's the little things that you don't pay attention to, that you just never really know what they're working behind the scenes. So, pretty impressive when you think about that. He also mentioned how he really likes the way FSU uses their linebackers, kind of lets them roam the field, uses them in different ways, it matches up to the way he feels that his game he plays, so he did like that as well. He also mentioned having a good relationship with the staff and a great experience good relationship with staff and players, and a great experience with fans who, when he came on visits, they knew who he was. They showed him love on social media. He did shout out Twitter, said it was crazy out there, which, we all know if you're part of FSU Twitter that you know what it's like out here in these tweet streets or whatever you want to call it. But the other influence he had, Derek Ray, who's on staff now, I believe he's a chief of staff. He grew up close to his hometown in California, about 20 minutes away, and he didn't know him from his time at Oklahoma State. So there was a connection there. Randy Shannon was able to go out to one of his games, And he said that he was pretty much knew where he was going to go before Randy even went out there, but he did enjoy being recruited in his own hometown, in his own city, even with FSU being across the country. So it was just the staff did a lot of things right. They pushed for the kid, and they ended up getting him. And there was a little concern late. Just him being a West Coast kid, he took a late visit to Oregon. I believe he was at the BYU game, if I'm not mistaken. So it didn't help. Oregon got a nice win too, but you also had Dan Lanning there, who's a defensive head coach, who was part of, pretty much a historic UGA defense. So things like that kind of made you a little worried, but it sounds like he knew where he was going to be, where he wanted to be after the LSU game. He had already informed a few people on the staff, some people close to him, that he just really enjoyed that game. He really enjoyed the way FSU played, and that he pretty much knew where he wanted to be. And this is really something that we've talked about for a while now, was this staff and this program still holds weight. Like, Florida State is still a name brand that is recognizable across the country, and this staff they're pretty good at recruiting. They just haven't had any success on the field to sell yet. They haven't had at a lot of positions anyway, really, outside of like defensive end, where you've got a few guys that have been put in the league. I mean, what are you pointing to on film to get these guys in? And so now you do have that. You do have a guy like Tatum Bethune who's making plays. You do have a guy like Kalen DeLoach who's he's having a standout season. DJ Lundy's having a nice season. Brendan Gant. So you're seeing some of these guys now where they can turn on the tape and they can go, hey, look, this is how we can feature you in this defense. And the same goes for Hakeem Williams on Friday. When you look at the way, and maybe Norvell's doing this on purpose, because there's a few times where I thought maybe they could run the ball a little more, but they pass it because they're successful with it. But he is able to showcase these receivers. I mean, look at Pokey Wilson. He's already had a 100-plus yard game, took over LSU, was the best receiver in that game. Johnny Wilson had an absolute dominant performance against Louisville, took that game over. So you're seeing them being able to feature certain position groups that they've had a little trouble recruiting in the past, and it's paying off for them. You look at the season that Jordan's having, and he's garnering some national attention as one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. And I think that plays into this. I mean, again, when you look at a 5-star receiver and how big that would be for FSU, just the same as a 4-star linebacker, getting him for Florida State. But when you look at teams like Texas A&M, who's got basically no offense, Miami, whose receivers aren't doing squat, and then you look at Florida State, who is now getting their pass game crunk up, and they can say that this is what we've been planning on doing all along. We just haven't had the pieces. And now that we have a few pieces, you see what we're doing. And imagine if we could add you to that mix. So I think that's definitely something to watch going forward. The more success they have on the field, the more they feature these certain positions, the more guys are going to be able to land. And that comes true for portal time as well. I mean, if you think about it, if you were a top-rated defensive end in the portal or through the high school ranks, why would you not want to come play at Florida State? You got a couple of guys who went to the NFL draft, and you had Jermaine Johnson follow that up, going as a first-rounder, and then you turn around and follow that up, and you got Jared Verse, who through 3 games in the season is pretty much already garnering national attention. So it's just big. It gives a lot of momentum in recruiting. There's a lot of enthusiasm behind this program. Again, this is their best start that they've had in a long time. So this is something that we've just been waiting to see. It's like you've had the genie bottled up, and you finally figured out kind of how to get it going, how to let it out. And, you obviously have to keep up the success. You can't just ride a 3-game win streak, hopefully 4-game win streak into the sunset. You have to keep winning. You have to keep these kids in the boat. But it is nice to see the staff be able to land somebody big like Blake Nichelson, and you would hope that on Friday they get some more good news with Hakeem Williams. Which it would be huge for Florida State. Getting that kind of top-end talent, which, again, is something that I've talked about before. Like, we see what Norvell's doing with the pieces that he's added. And I love these guys. But, they're not 4 and 5 stars. And so the success they're having with what they have right now, just imagine if they can get in that top-end talent in here. And, again, that's not that these guys aren't performing well. But, imagine this team with 6, 8, 5 stars on there, and what the staff could do with them. So it just makes you excited for the future. It's something positive for Florida State, and it's the momentum that you've been looking for. So that's pretty much, that's what you've been hoping for this whole time, because the 2 things that you've been really kind of held back on you've been a little held back on success on the field. You haven't seen much winning there, and you're like, okay, now we need to see it on the field. Like, we feel good about everything else. And you've had some questions in recruiting. But those two things go hand in hand. So you're seeing some of the success, and I feel like the more success Florida State gets, the more momentum they get, the more you're going to see recruiting take off. You're going to start to get some of these guys, and that's evident this weekend, which is another reason why I think Norvell wants to hopefully put on a show this weekend against Boston College, because you have an opportunity to, but it's also a big recruiting weekend. I think there's going to be something like 20-something recruits on the sidelines for this game. So it is important. This is a very important game. They're all important right now at this stage in the rebuild for Florida State, but this one in particular for recruiting as well. Florida State's 2023 class is now top 20 with the addition of Blake Nichelson, and it could also move to probably top 15, they're estimating, if you get Hakeem in the boat. So, again, just this is what you need to see. This is kind of the missing pieces so far for Florida State. They're adding the success on the field. They're starting to heat up in recruiting a little bit, and so it's just nice to see. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and get into Boston College preview. I don't want to run you guys too long. I actually did a Twitter poll a couple days ago, kind of asking you guys for your opinion on what you wanted as far as content. Just some things to help me create the best content I can for you. And one of the things I asked was, how long is your ideal podcasting? It was pretty much, the consensus was to an hour or less. You can go over an hour if you need to, but, not too excessively long. So I know I get long with my previews because I like to go in depth, and I'm sure you guys are aware of that if you've ever listened to one, but we're going to try and get on with it here. So looking at BC coming up, two things real quick. I want to just correct from my last episode. Once you put a podcast out there, there's no taking it back. And so when I go back and listen to a couple things, two things that I errors that I want to correct from last episode was, I said that the 35 points you scored against Louisville was the most you scored this season. That was not the case. It was actually Duquesne, but somehow I just completely blanked out on that one. I also said that Miami's defense was giving up a lot of points. That was not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was yards, and that they are giving up a lot of. So in case you were yelling at your phone or your radio saying, you're an idiot, get it right or whatever, I just wanted to make those two corrections. So again, with that being said, we'll move on to the BC preview. So Boston College comes to town, 8 o'clock at night, like we said, in Doak. Should be a pretty good atmosphere. Should be nice weather. Should be a good turnout. Florida State does open up as a 16.5-point favorite, which I feel like is very doable for Florida State, depending on who your personnel is that you get back. Florida State hasn't had a 20-point win over a Power 5 team since Duke in 2020. So the spread is a little big, in my opinion, but if they have the starters back, I do think they can cover that. The ESPN matchup predictor, for whatever weight you put into that, not really a lot. Florida State, it leans heavy Florida State, 89.2% chance of winning. Obviously, like we mentioned a second ago, injuries are still very much in play for Florida State. There has been a lot of positive developments, but we still don't know. And this is something that Norvell does, is he's pretty coy about his injuries, unless they're season-ending, which he's pretty straight up about that. But we've seen where Fabian Lovett was listed on the depth chart and didn't travel to Louisville. We've seen where Caden Lyles came back to practice and then was ruled out for the season. So you really just have no idea. I mean, you just don't know. You don't know who's going to play and who's not, and we probably won't know that until Saturday. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I mean, I am technically I'm a paramedic, so I kind of know a little bit about medical stuff, but that's my day job, or should I say night job. But I don't know. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not part of this medical staff. So if you trust them to make a decision that a guy's good to go, you have to roll with that. And I do feel like when you have a beatable team in front of you, if the doctor says, tells Norvell that there's a risk that they could re-aggravate this, and instead of losing them for 1 week, you could lose them for 4 or 5, I don't think you play the guys. And that's just my personal opinion. It's not worth it, because I think you can beat BC. It may not be pretty, but you can beat them without the guys. But again, Florida State has not earned the right to overlook anybody yet. Even the games you thought they should win handily, they've all been close. Everything's been, everything you've had to reach for a bottle of aspirin in the fourth quarter. and so for having chest pain. And so you can't really overlook anybody. You can't just say, oh, it's Boston College, XYZ. You have to get up for this game. You have to still play hard, and they're going to have to be ready for this even if they don't have the starters. But I do feel like if most of the guys are back, you can cover that spread. You can have a dominant performance. You may have to get creative with some things. You may see Leonard Warner play a lot. You may have to slide Dennis Briggs inside to get some depth at defensive tackle if Lovett and Malcolm Ray aren't back yet. So that's just some things I'm looking at, which will skew kind of the preview for this and the predictions because we don't know who's going to play or not. I do think if the guys are available to play, I think if it's a pain management situation but there's no further risk, I think you got to let them go. That's part of football. You're going to be banged up. You're going to be injured. You're going to be playing through pain at some point. And again, you have a big recruiting weekend. You have a team that you could walk away from in the second half. You could pull off from and have a nice, comfortable victory, which would look good in front of all the recruits, which would look good in front of your home fans. And to be honest, if something were to happen and you were to drop this game to BC, that's an absolute disaster. That is a black eye on all the momentum that you've built so far because they're not a good team. And you feel like Florida State is on the verge of something special. And when you get to these when you get to this step in the process for Florida State, your goal is you need to win the games that you're supposed to win. You're supposed to beat Duquesne. You're supposed to beat Louisiana. You're supposed to beat Boston College. Things like that. You're supposed to beat those teams. And then you're supposed to steal a couple games that you're not supposed to. You're supposed to upset an LSU. You're supposed to upset, maybe you knock Clemson off or something like that at home. Those are the things that you're supposed to do. And this is one of those winnable games. So Florida State needs to go out and handle their business. I mean, like I said, you got should be a really good home atmosphere, 70,000 plus. Student section is already sold out. Maybe you can rattle BC a little bit. I will say that they have played a night game at Virginia Tech already, which was like 65,000 plus. So they played in front of some noise. Now, granted, they didn't have a good game, so it could work to your advantage. They obviously didn't handle it very well. But I feel like whoever's playing quarterback, you do have some opportunities here to take advantage of getting the ground game going. BC's ground game is terrible. Obviously, you probably know if you follow anything about football or college football, they've had a lot of injuries up front on the offensive line, which makes it hard to run any kind of offense. They've lost to Rutgers in a game where they scored 21. They lost to Virginia Tech where they scored 10, and then they scored 38 against a terrible FCS team in Maine. So really, to me, this is a game where I don't expect Boston College. Now, again, it depends on how many guys you have up front because realistically, if you have Fabian Lovett and you have Malcolm Ray and you have Jared Verse, it's going to be a long night for that offensive line, and I don't think their offense is going to be able to get much going. And if that's the case, realistically, I think anything over 20 points gets you a win. So, of course, you want Jordan back because if they have Jordan, I mean, I'm thinking you're getting in 30s to 40s territory. And I don't think BC is going to score more than 20 points. So that's just something I'm looking for. Really, Florida State just has to, if nothing else, they have to play a clean game, limit your turnovers, limit your mistakes, limit your penalties, be good on special teams. And I know, I get it, kicking, I know. But like kick coverage and stuff like that. But you just don't want to let any mistakes let a team into a game that's not supposed to be there. Florida State should beat Boston College. You don't want to lose it on stupid mistakes. And luckily for Florida State, they've been pretty disciplined this year. They've played pretty smart in most games. So you hope that's something that they can build on again this week. So we'll just get into taking a look at Boston College. Those are just kind of some of the qualifiers that you got to get out of the way, just with so many injuries and so much uncertainty coming into this game. So they are 1-2 on the year. Under Hafley so far, they are 13-13. They have currently, I think they were initially slated to win about 6.5 games. That's been pulled back a little bit. A win projection I saw on a BC coverage site was down to 3.5, and they're only at about 4.2% chance to make a bowl game. So it's going to be a rough year for BC. And honestly, with the amount of injuries they've had up front, I mean, it'd be impossible for anybody to have really a good season like that. They are 0-1 in away games. Obviously, like we talked about, the only one they played was at Virginia Tech, where they lost 27-10. Their last meeting versus FSU, we know last year, Florida State did manage to win that game 26-22 on the road at BC, There was some very heavy ref influence, and I really hate making excuses blaming the refs, but if you watch the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There was some absolute, just terrible calls. And again, that's why they don't call it the ACC another crappy call for nothing. So that was something that it did have a little bit of influence on the game. But when you look at it, I know Jerkovic, and that's what I'm going to call him. I don't know exactly how you say it, but Jerkovic, when he came back from injury. So I don't know if he was fully healthy or not. But he had one of his worst games of the season against Florida State. And Jordan, coincidentally, actually had one of his best games passing of the year. I think he threw 251 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. So it was one of his better games for the year, which is encouraging for this matchup, especially considering you feel, anyway, that Florida State is a much better team than they were last year, and Boston College is a much worse team than they were last year. So getting into Boston College, like we talked about before, so they lost to Rutgers to open the season 22-21. They put up 312 total yards in there. And the thing is, guys, like, they have an okay passing offense, but their rush game is abysmal. It is one of the worst I've ever seen in college football. They put up 312 yards against Rutgers. They had 283 pass yards and 29 rushing yards. If you take away the negative yards, they had 41 total, but still less than 50 yards against Rutgers. They were 7 of 16 on third down, and they had three turnovers in that game. So that's not an impressive performance against a team like Rutgers, who's kind of a punching bag of the Big Ten. Rutgers put up 322 total yards, and 212 of that came on the ground. So you see the opportunity to not only stop their run, but you can run it on them as well. You can get your ground game going. Second game of the season, they lose to Virginia Tech, 27-10 on the road in Blacksburg. They only put up 155 total yards. And now the thing is, Virginia Tech, their offense is pretty bad. It's 93rd overall currently, and their defense is good, though. That is where their strength is on defense, and they were able to pretty much shut Boston College down. They did a lot to eliminate Zay Flowers. They ran a lot of brackets on him, some double coverage, and I don't even think he had a target or a reception till part of the way into the second quarter. So, if you copy that game plan, you are able to take him away. So, again, 155 total yards in the whole game, 151 pass, and I know this is going to sound like I'm making this up because it's almost unbelievable. 4 rush yards. Literally 4 rush yards. Now, again, like I said, if you take away the negative plays, the sacks and whatnot, they had 29 total yards. But still, 29 yards, you're talking about, 70 yards in 2 games? It's almost unbelievable. Like, it is impressively bad. Which is uncharacteristic for Boston College, which is what surprises me too. Look at their running back, Garwow. He was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. So it's like, man, what happened? Like, obviously the rushing or the blocking up front has been terrible, and we understand that. But, that's just literally getting nothing from your ground game. And so they were 2 of 15 on third down in that game, which is, again, terrible. That is awful on third down. At one point, when I was doing a rewatch of that game, I saw a stat where they said that at the end of the first quarter, BC had less than 5 net yards in the entire first quarter. They couldn't do anything against Virginia Tech. And again, Virginia Tech offense is not all that great, and they put up 284 yards on them, 140 pass, which, honestly, I think Tate Rodemaker is probably as good as Virginia Tech starting quarterback. They put up 144 yards on the ground. Again, you see where you can get some things going when you're running backs. Then they played Maine. They got their first win of the year, 38-17. And, this was a game now. They were in a little bit of a dogfight. It was 14-10 BC in the second quarter. So it's not like they pulled off and ran away with this one. Maine is 0-3, and they have lost 31-0 to New Mexico. So that kind of gives you a little gauge of just how bad that team is. And then BC kind of struggled with them. Now, they did put up 431 yards, 320 passing yards, 111 rush. So, they may have a little bit of confidence coming into this game now that they've had a little bit of offensive success. But, when it comes against a bad FCS team, it might be false hope. They had Maine put up 378 yards on them, 289 passing, which Boston College's strength on defense is their pass game, or is their pass defense. So That's encouraging to see. If an FCS team can put up almost 300 yards passing against their strength, you feel good about what you can do against it too. Only 89 yards on the ground, but again, you're talking about a not great FCS team. Maine did have 3 turnovers and 7 penalties in that game too. So that's what I mean. Like, if you play a clean game, you never know. Maine could have been very much in that game if they had just played a little bit cleaner. Speaking of the BC offense, we'll go ahead and get into our offensive preview. Their offense is pretty slow-paced. They don't run a whole lot of plays. As a matter of fact, they average around 48 plays per game, which is 128th in the country. And there's only 131 teams, so they're not going anywhere in a hurry. For reference on that, Florida State runs an average of 74 plays a game. So you're going to get a lot more at-bats for Florida State than you are in Boston College in this game, which also is good because then your defense is not going to get very tired if they're only playing 50 snaps a game. They do have an okay passing game when you look at Zay Flowers, who is a dynamic receiver. And the key for the offense, their whole passing attack starts up front. It depends on whether Jerkovic can get time to even make these throws. They do have a productive tight end. They do have a couple of other weapons at receiver who, they're okay. They're not like game breakers or anything like that. But Zay Flowers is a guy that you have to keep your eye on. He is very talented, and he can do some work in space. He's responsible for most of their offense. Jerkovic himself, he's been inconsistent to me. I know a lot of guys are high on him. They think he projects to be an NFL guy. I know he's like 6'5", over 200 pounds. He does have some tools, some good mechanics and everything like that. But from what I've watched, he has a lot of overthrows. He has a lot of underthrows. He tends to force feed Zay Flowers sometimes to his detriment, and that has led to a few interceptions of his, which, again, you have to take with a grain of salt that he is pretty much knows he has to hike the ball and get rid of it, or he has to hike the ball and run for his life. And that's something that we've seen with FSU in the past, and it didn't lead to any success, and that's killing them this year. So that's the thing is, I'm not as sold on him as a quarterback as some people, but he has the ability to make some throws with some of his playmakers in space. But he's definitely not the type of passer you're going to see next week at Wake Forest with Sam Hartman. So going over their offense, like I said, if you get the strength of your defensive line back, if Florida State is at 100%, say you get Cooper back or Lovett back, say you get Malcolm Ray back, maybe even get Amarion Cooper, it's going to be a long night for this offense because they're not going to be able to block Robert Cooper. They're not going to be able to block Fabian Lovett. They're not going to be able to block Jared Verse for the most part. Derek McClendon had a good game against Louisville. It's going to be a problem. So that's something that I'm looking out for. Even the backups should be able to have some success against this offensive line. But in fairness, they didn't have a great game against Louisville. Now, I know, thank goodness, we don't have to play another mobile quarterback. Like I've had enough of Jaden Daniels. I've had enough of Malik Cunningham. And I'm just, thank goodness. Like I know they need a break from a mobile quarterback. And I feel like, my chest pains need a break from that too because, man, I just hate playing against guys like that. And Jerkovic is not mobile. He'll run for a first down on some short yardage plays, but he's not very fast. Our linebackers, if they can catch Cunningham, they should run him down in a hurry. But like I said, even if you're playing some of your backups, you should still be able to have some success because, I know it wasn't great in Louisville, but it was a different quarterback that they were going against, and that is a better offensive line. I know they haven't performed great this year, but that was supposed to be one of their strengths. So they're pretty decent. When you look at, like I said, average plays per game is only 48 per game, 128th in the country. They average a 60, almost 61% pass to run. They are very pass heavy, obviously, because their run game doesn't work at all. Typically out of 48 plays, they're going to run 32 pass and around 16 run plays per game. Like I said, keep in mind Florida State runs 74 per game, which is 26 in the country. So it's pretty high, but it's not the highest. Their total offense is 115th in the country, allowing about 300 yards a game, 299.3 to be exact. Their passing offense allows 251 yards a game, which isn't great, but it isn't bad either. You want to see Florida State hold them under that average, hopefully. Your secondary really hasn't been tested a whole lot this season, and I feel like this is going to be one of those games where they're going to be tested a few times. with Zay Flowers and things like that. So hopefully you can hold them under their average. Rushing offense, like we talked about, guys, it is just terrible. 48 yards a game average, which is 130th out of 131 teams. I don't even know who's worse than that, but I don't know how you get worse than that. And like I said, Boston College is normally known to have good offensive line and good run game. Their running back was over 1,000 yards last year, so it just speaks to the struggles of their offensive line. When you look at their offensive success rate, it's 31.3%, which is 120th in the country. Passing success rate, 32.8%, 112th in the country. Rushing success rate, 28.1%, tied for 125th in the country. So this offense just really, it's not going anywhere. It's not getting a whole lot accomplished, which is something that Florida State can really take advantage of. Tackles for loss allowed per game is 8.33 per game at 119th in the country. They're allowing 4 sacks per game on average, which is 127th in the country. So you can get to Jurkovic, obviously, with this offensive line struggling. If you can get pressure on him, you can have some success. They've allowed 53 pressures total this year. For reference, Florida State has allowed 39. Their third down offense is 101st in the country. They convert 33.3%, so they're not good on third down by any means. Their red zone offense, they convert 77.8% of the time, which is 93rd in the country. And guess what, guys? Someone else has kicker problems besides us. We're going to get into special teams in a minute, but their kicker is only 40% on field goals. So it's not just us sweating this week every time they line up for a field goal. And he's missed from all different ranges. So hopefully Fitz can get a little bit of momentum. Maybe he can get a couple field goals in here, get his psyche right, get his head back right, and get back to making some field goals. I mean, you don't feel confident, but we'll get to that in a minute. So looking at Jurkovic, his passer profile, on the season, he's 63 of 107 for a 58.9% completion percentage, 738 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. His adjusted completion percentage is 69.7%, which I feel is important because that takes out drops and throwaways. And when you're behind an offensive line like this, you're going to have to throw the ball away a fair amount. So that makes his completion percentage look a little bit better, 69.7%. His big-time throw rate is 2.7%, which is pretty low. Turnover-worthy play rate is 3%, which isn't bad. That's pretty in line. So far, his QBR is 40.5, which is 96 in the country, and his PFF grade is 66, which is somewhere between average to quality starter. Remember, 60 is about walk-on-the-field average depth player. 70 is kind of going to be your Power 5 starter level. So his PFF grade was 66, and his passing grade was 64.7. He's been sacked 12 times this year. And again, like I said, he's not the most athletic guy. He has 6 rush attempts for 44 yards on the season. When you can pressure him, you can find some room for some success here. When he's been kept clean, which is given time to throw, no pressures, for about 60% of the time. He's been pressured 40% of the time. So he's been pressured a significant amount of his dropbacks. And when he's kept clean, his completion percentage is 67.1%. When he's pressured, it's 43.2%. He has 507 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions when he's kept clean, and 231 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So, I mean, really hasn't been much better when he's kept clean, but you can see that if you can get to him, you can get some inaccurate passes from him. They do run play action around 33% of the time, and most of their yards come between the numbers. They do work the center of the field pretty good, which if you watch some of the film, they like to get Zay Flowers in space, kind of working back across the middle where he can get some, get the catch and get some yards afterwards. As far as their passing depth goes, their short passes, which is 0 to 9 yards, account for 31.8% of their passes. He has a 67.6% completion percentage and a PFF grade of 55.8. So it hasn't really been all that great. 1 touchdown, 1 pick on short passes. Mid-range, which you're looking at 10 to 19 yards, is 21.5% of their passes. He has a 60.9% completion percentage there, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 87.9 PFF grade. So he's really effective on those mid-range passes. As far as his deep passes go, it's only 17.8% of their passes, and his completion percentage is 26.3, which really not a lot of quarterbacks' deep passing is all that great. 218 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, PFF grade of 57.5. So those mid-range passes are what you got to watch. Like I said, he will try and run it for some first downs here and there, kind of scrambling out, but he's not very fast. So I think the linebackers should be able to close on him pretty quick. He's not a terrible passer when he gets time. He just doesn't get it very often. But he is not the most accurate quarterback. Like I said, I saw multiple times where they had some opportunities and he just missed them. They do run a lot of quick passes to kind of mitigate that pressure. You'll see him take like a quick 3-step drop and chunk it down the field. They do run some quick plays just because they know they can't block up front. And so they have to do something to scheme around. We'll run through some of the other playmakers on offense real fast. Obviously, I've mentioned Zay Flowers, wide receiver number 4. He's their most dynamic guy, their most highly targeted. 21 receptions on 34 targets, 61.8% catch rate for him, 286 yards, 3 touchdowns. And so you really got to watch out for him. He's the guy who can make things work in space. He has 164 yards after contact. So you can see there, 286 yards and 164 after contact. He's a hard guy to get down. He is kind of slippery. He is fast. He's not a big guy, but he definitely is the guy that you have to single out on this offense. He does line up out wide about 60% of the time, in the slot about 40% of the time, and his PFF grade is 74.4. So that's above quality starter status at the Power 5 level. They do have a productive tight end, George Takas, number 80. I think I'm saying that right. He has 15 receptions on 22 targets, 68.2% reception percentage for 154 yards and 1 touchdown, 61 yak yards, so not a ton there. PFF grade is 62, so he's slightly above an average depth player. Not great, but he did kind of stand out to me when I was watching the film as a guy who seemed to make a lot of catches for them. The next guy that you're going to want to keep your eye on is Jaden Williams. He wears number 0. He is their third most targeted guy. 8 receptions on 15 targets, only a 53.3% completion percent or reception percentage, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 24 yak yards, so not getting a whole lot after the catch there. His PFF grade is 60.4, so barely above average. He lines up out wide about 95% of the time. And again, guys, that's the thing is like they have a couple of playmakers, but most of these guys are just average college players. Not that Florida State is loaded with talent, but I think Florida State is more talented across the board. At running back, you have Pat Garwow, number 24, 41 carries, 118 yards. He's only averaging 2.9 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns on the season, 1 fumble. And a stat that really kind of blew me away was he has 116 yards after contact, which means he's getting hit at the line of scrimmage pretty much every time. He has 2 yards where he has been able to run without contact. I mean, that's insane to even think about. Like, imagine being 1,000-yard back from last year, and then this year you're at 118 yards. You're averaging 48 yards a game. You got 116 yak yards because you're getting hit at the line of scrimmage as soon as you get the ball. It's just got to be frustrating for him. I mean, you almost feel bad for him, but not this week anyway. Three runs of 10-plus yards, PFF grade of 62.6. So it's not that he's a bad back. It's just the offensive line he's running behind. But he's not a game-breaker type of guy either. Up front on the offensive line, again, guys, this is really what is shooting them in the foot with their offense. So they lost 4 starters coming into the season who were all really good offensive linemen. And then they had one potentially who they felt was an NFL guy, all-conference type of guy, Christian Mahogany, who was going to be a starting guard for them. He goes out in the preseason, and then they just lost another guy, a tackle of theirs, to injury in the Virginia Tech game. He's out for the season as well. So they're digging really, really deep into the depth chart. I think they got a lot of guys playing who they didn't intend on playing to begin with. And I believe, I'm not 100% sure on this. I've seen it before, but I'm pretty sure their left tackle is actually a walk-on, a redshirt freshman walk-on. So, man, I really hope Jerry Verse can play in this game because I'm telling you, he is going to absolutely eat against this offensive line if he does play, especially if you can get him on a redshirt freshman walk-on tackle. He just doesn't have a chance. And I do say the reason I worry about some of the backups playing if the starters aren't available is when I watch Rutgers, and I understand Rutgers, again, is not the greatest, but they were able to give Jurkovec some time on a few pass plays. They were able to give him a decent little pocket sometimes. So if you don't have some of your more dominant guys, they could give him some opportunities. But across the board, they're a decent-sized offensive line. Your left tackle Number 61, he's 6'4", 301 pounds. That's a redshirt freshman. He only has 97 career snaps so far. His PFF grade is 46.4, which is, that's way below average. That is, you don't want to have to be playing that guy. That is a absolute depth player who's been forced into action and has just not performed well. Their left guard, number 74, 6'4", 316. So they got some size. He's a fifth-year senior, 219 career snaps. Most of that came this year, 165 of those. He's a fifth-year guy, and he only had 54 snaps in the prior 4 years. So I don't think they intended on playing this guy. It's just, again, another guy forced into action. PFF grade has been 62.6, which is still, that's slightly above average. Their center, number 66, a little bit of an undersized guy, 6'4", 283 pounds, redshirt freshman, 220 career snaps, 206 of those came this season, and he has a PFF grade of 60.8, so just above average. His run blocking grade is actually 52.8, and that probably has a lot to do with him being undersized, which is something we saw with Maurice Smith last year, which is why it's nice to see him bulked up this offseason. At right guard, number 53, 6'2", 294 pounds, redshirt sophomore. He only has 130 snaps of experience, period. He has 0 snaps prior to the season, so he's learning on the fly too. His PFF grade is 58.7, below average, and his run block grade is 54.9. So, you can see where the struggles are coming in. It's really been the Achilles heel of their offense, and that's something that we've been familiar with for a long time. And you see how hard it is to run an offense without a good offensive line, or even an average offensive line. And when you have a bad offensive line, it makes it hard to do anything successfully. And really, when you think about it too, how is their depth got to look? If they're playing all their depth players as starters right now, if they lose anyone else, I don't know what they're going to do. You feel bad for them because, we've been through it. But again, hey, not this week. So I hate it for them, but this comes at a great time for us, honestly. With such a banged-up team, this just feels like just what the doctor ordered for a team with a lot of injuries, is to kind of get a sitting duck in Boston College. But again, like we said, Florida State can't overlook anybody. You screw around and lose this game, and it's going to look bad because Boston College has always played Florida State tough. They've never really been able to just go in there and just whoop up on Boston College. A lot of times they do play them tough, so you can't overlook someone, especially a conference opponent. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, they are experienced on this defense. They have a lot of upperclassmen. Most of the guys on that side of the ball are seniors or fifth-year seniors. So you're going to have some guys with experience, some older guys. They do have a pretty low missed tackle percentage. No starter on the team has over a 20% missed tackle rate. And for reference, last week against Louisville, 12 players from their defense who were significant contributors had over a 25% missed tackle rate. So it's a pretty disciplined defense. They do tackle well, although I will say when I watched the Virginia Tech game, those guys broke through a lot of arm tackles. So, if you think if they do that again this week, you like your backs to be able to break some tackles. Trey Benson is a missed tackle machine. And Trayshawn Ward himself has been great too. So you see some opportunity there. Their defensive line is relatively undersized, and they don't get a lot of push. So now that you see Florida State has an offensive line with some size to them, I think you have the ability to move these guys around, which is something we said last week against Louisville. They were an undersized defensive line too, and I think Florida State had some success with them. So I think you're going to kind of look for the same thing this week where they can just kind of push some guys around. Their linebackers, they are pretty disciplined, and they do fill gaps well. They do flow with the offense well, but they're not the most athletic group. A lot of times when I watched the film on Rutgers and Virginia Tech, if you were able to get outside and get the edge on them and get the corner, they weren't going to catch you. And I think our backs have good enough speed that if they can do the same thing there, if they can get to the edge, I think you're going to be in a foot race, and it's probably going to be a DB that's going to have to bring you down. But their linebackers are one of their better position groups. Not so much in coverage, but against the run. They do like to mix their fronts between 3 and 4 man. A lot of times what I noticed, they would run 4 man in like the short yardage down in distance, and anything like 3rd and 10, 3rd and 14, something like that, they would drop to a 3-man front, but they do like to blitz, I will say that. And a lot of times they brought, on 3rd and long, they brought a few extra blitzers to try and not let you sit back there and pick them apart. So Florida State's going to have to do well with their blitz pickup this week because they will bring the house, because they know they gotta win somewhere, and it's going to have to be on their defense because right now they can't trust their offense. So looking at a few stats for them, their total defense is 42nd in the country. They're allowing 328 yards per game. I will say you kind of have to couch this a little bit here too. When looking at their pass defense is allowing 179.9 yards per game. It's the 30th best in the country. And you would initially think to yourself, that's pretty good. That's doing something. And granted, they have played 2 Power 5 teams. But you look at, it's Virginia Tech and it's Rutgers. Rutgers has the 119th ranked passing offense. And, I mean, again, they're a Power 5 team, but they're not a good one. Virginia Tech has the 86th ranked passing offense. They already lost to Old Dominion this year. And they played a FCS team who probably, shouldn't put up many passing yards on them at all, which is kind of something we talked about with Florida State. Like, they had almost 650 yards against Duquesne. So you knew their stats looked a little bit inflated in some areas. And like, we haven't seen the run game quite perform the same since, obviously, because of the level of talent that you've been facing. That was a lot greater than Duquesne. But I feel that works the same way here too. I think they're getting a little overinflated numbers and rankings on their pass defense because they haven't played anyone with a good quarterback. They haven't played anyone with dominant receivers. And if Jordan plays, he's going to be the best quarterback that they faced. These receivers, I'm not going to say they're dominant from top to bottom, but you have some guys who are really impact receivers, especially Johnny Wilson. And now that he's had a breakout game, you're going to have to account for him. So you may have to double him. They may have to give some safety help, which is going to give one-on-ones for some other guys. And you have some guys that you feel good about, like Micah Pittman. We've been waiting for him to have a breakout game, and it seems like every other receiver has kind of had, well, not every other one, but Pokey's had one, Johnny's had one. So, who's next? Who's overdue for a big game? And you think Micah Pittman could be a guy you look at? Deuce Spain could be a guy you look at? I don't think we're going to see Winston Wright back this week, obviously, but in the future, that could be a guy that you could take advantage of. I think their numbers are a little better on defense, just given who they've played. Their rushing defense isn't that great, though, giving up 148.3 yards per game, which is 77th in the country. And when you look at the success rate, their defensive success rate overall is 39.8%, which is 71st in the country. Their passing success rate is 27.8%, which is 9th. And I will say, to be fair, after I just trashed them a little bit, this was what we expected their defense to be good at coming into the season, was the passing defense. They had a lot of experienced guys, and they had a good passing defense last year. They have a good coaching staff at BC, and they are able to do some things. I think their defensive coordinator was an NFL guy. I'm not 100% sure there. So, they're able to scheme some things up, and this is what we thought they were going to be good at, and it is their strength so far. But again, like I said, you have to couch it with that, what we talked about a second ago. Their rushing success rate is 47.4%, which is tied for 118th in the country. So, again, you see some opportunities to not only stop their ground game, but get your ground game going as well. And depending on who the quarterback is, that can be an advantage. If you have to roll Tate out there as the starter and you can put up 200 yards on the ground, you don't really have to ask a whole lot from Tate. If you have Jordan out there, it probably doesn't matter because he can cut him up anyway. But if you have the ground game going too, that helps him too. So I think this is the opportunity to really get your backs involved and get the ground game going. They have 3 interceptions on the year, which is 42nd in the country. They're averaging 6 tackles for loss a game, which is 52nd in the country. Their third down defense is 49th in the country, and their red zone defense is 54th. So you have some opportunities against them. I'd say they're a top 50 defense, but they're not world beaters. Like you're not going out there against Georgia. You're not going out there against Alabama. So you can put up some points on these guys. You see that, again, Rutgers put up 22 on them, and Virginia Tech put up 27. And I think Florida State has a much better offense than either one of those teams. So I don't see why you can't get to 30 points on them, possibly more depending on who you have back as their starters. We'll just run through the positions real quick, some guys to watch. Defensive line, on the defensive end, they have number 6. He's 6'2", 236. He's a sophomore. PFF grade is 87, so he's a pretty impact guy for them. That's a really good grade. That's someone you'll have to watch out for. But again, he's kind of a smaller guy at 6'2", 236. The other side, defensive end, number 97. He is 6 foot 256. He's a fifth-year senior, and his PFF grade is 64.5. So just kind of middle of the road. Better than a depth guy, not quite a quality starter guy. Defensive tackle up front, and this is where you see some of the undersized come in. Number 93, he's 5'11", 286 pounds. Fifth-year senior transfer from Buffalo, and he has a PFF grade of 58.5, and his rush defense is 57.9. Again, that comes from being undersized, and if you got guys like Dimitri Emmanuel and Maurice Smith and Dylan Gibbons, you would hope that they could push around a guy who's 5'11", 286. I'm only about 30 pounds shy of that, so that's like me lining up a defensive tackle, and I'm sure those guys would probably squash me like a bug. So again, you have some opportunities there. Another defensive tackle that they have, number 96, he's 6'2", 295. He's a junior, PFF grade of 67.8. So again, they have some okay guys, but there are some weaknesses too. There's some holes in this defense. At linebacker, their lead guy is going to be their middle linebacker, number 42, Vinnie De Palma, which if you could paint a prototypical picture for what you would expect as a Boston College linebacker, Vinnie De Palma, number 42, Vinnie De Palma, you just like saying his name. But he's 5'11", 223. He is a senior, and he's one of their better linebackers. He does have a PFF grade of 71.4, which is that's above quality starter status. He's really good against the run. PFF grade is 83.5, but his coverage skills are lacking a little bit. His coverage grade is only 55.7. He has allowed 5 receptions on 6 targets. Has not given up a touchdown yet. He's pretty active. He has 16 tackles on the season so far and 1 assist. So again, he's a guy that's going to play good against a run. But if you can get some favorable matchups with Cam McDonald or Micah Pittman in the slot, if you could get a matchup on him, I think you have some opportunities there. Their other linebacker, Cam Arnold, number 5, he's 6'1", 227-pound junior. He has a PFF grade of 67.6. The same kind of narrative here. His rush defense grade is 82.5, so he's good against the run, and his coverage grade is only 54. So you can find some opportunities if you can get matched up on these linebackers to really hit him for some passing plays. He has allowed 9 receptions on 13 yards. He does have 9 receptions on 13 targets, which is a 69.2% completion rate against him. He has 17 tackles and 7 assists, so he's probably one of their best. He's their best defensive player. I believe that's the most tackles on the team, and he does have a pick in there as well. As most of you guys are familiar with, they have Jaden Woodby, who transferred from Florida State, and I don't really have too much bad to say about Woodby. He was a very good student. He was a very accomplished young man. He has his head screwed on straight, so not a whole lot you can say there. Unfortunately, I think given the situation he came into, it wasn't great. And I think that he has found success at Boston College, and he's been a good player for them, and I think he's already went on to get his master's and stuff like that. So kudos to Woodby for being able to kind of revive his season. But he is a 5th-year senior for them. He does line up in the box a lot. He is kind of like a hybrid linebacker/safety. He has 13 tackles and 9 assists on the season. So again, he's been pretty active. He's better in coverage than the other linebackers. He has 4 receptions allowed on 8 targets and 1 touchdown given up. No PBUs, no interceptions, but his PFF grade is 65.5. Rush defense is 74.4, and coverage is 64.4. So he's pretty solid against the run, and also he's probably their best coverage, linebacker if you want to call him that. At safety, number 3, 5'10", 188. Again, 5th-year senior. All these older guys. He has allowed 4 receptions on 6 targets, not giving up a touchdown. Does have 1 pick so far. PFF grade of 67.9. So he's a solid player for them. Cornerbacks, you're looking at number 20. He's also a 5th-year senior. He's allowed 12 receptions on 22 targets. He has given up 2 touchdowns, but he does have 1 pick and 2 PBUs with a 67.8 PFF grade. And he has given up the most yards of the secondary, too, at 183 yards. So Jones is his last name, number 20. He may be a guy you can go after. The other cornerback they like to use, DeBerry, number 21, 5'11", 177-pound senior. He has allowed 7 receptions on 12 targets, no touchdowns, no interceptions, no PBUs, and a PFF grade of 66.2. So not a bad player, but not exactly someone you're scared to go at. And that pretty much wraps up the defense. So again, you like your offensive line with their size, and I know you're probably going to be without your tackle Robert Scott, but I think Darius is a very capable backup. And again, now we did say, from the get-go, that injuries was the one thing this team couldn't afford to have, because you felt good about their starting 22, but you were a little concerned about some depth at some positions, and it's being tested already. And you just really need that luck to turn around, because Florida State, you feel like they're on the verge of something special if they can just stay healthy, because injuries can derail a season faster than anything else can. And so, but with this offensive line, I feel like you can get some push against them. I feel like if Jordan's in the game especially, you can get some matchups that are very favorable in the pass game. And again, I feel like, yes, their rush defense is their weakness, and their linebackers are pretty good, but with the backs that you have, you can still make some plays on these guys. Like if you can get past that second level, if you can get your offensive linemen up to some linebackers. A lot of times when I watch the film, some of their guys were in position, but they were just being smothered by an offensive lineman climbing to the next level, or a wide receiver who was blocking. And we already know Florida State wide receivers block very well. So you do have an opportunity to get the run game going here. So moving on to special teams, again, this is finally, we kind of get to watch someone else struggle a little bit here. And let me not jinx him first, because I don't want him to have a perfect game while we still struggle. But the BC kicker so far this year is 2 of 5 on field goals, which is 40%. He has missed one from under 30, from 30 to 39, and from 40 to 49. He's not kicked one over 50. So he's been inconsistent from basically all ranges. So that's an advantage. Really it negates each other, because, we both kind of suck at kicking, but you would hope that Fitzgerald at home, in his home environment where he's a little more comfortable, not so much crowd noise to deal with and stuff like that, you hope he can kind of get this thing turned around and get things going back right, because I know his confidence has to just be shot, and you really hope that this could be an opportunity for him to get some success. And I do think that the lack of trust you have for your kicker is going to go into the game plan a little bit. You may see Florida State go for some things more often, but Mike Norvell rides with his guys, and he already said Fitz is the kicker. I think they have a walk-on, but I don't think he's going to get a look, and I could see Mike Norvell teeing him up for some good opportunities to make some kicks just to kind of get his confidence back, because that is the thing about Mike. He rides with his guys, and he trusts them. Kick return defense, Boston College is 118th in the country, allowing 26.18 yards per return with no touchdowns allowed so far. Kick return, they're 27th in the country, averaging 24.5 yards per return and no touchdowns so far. So the good thing is Florida State's kick coverage teams have been pretty solid. It's been one of the most impressive special teams aspects that they've had this season, and that's been nice to see. They have been able to pretty much smother everybody. Punt return defense for Boston College, they're allowing only about a half a yard negative return right now, which is 9th in the country. And I believe last week Florida State I saw was negative 1.5 yards. I don't know how the Louisville affected that stats, but probably not going to be a whole lot going in the return game for either side here. On punt return, they're averaging 8.3 yards per return, 0 touchdowns, 59th in the country. So that pretty much wraps up the special teams preview and the preview for both sides of the ball. At the end of the day, I think for Boston College, if you're looking for a path to victory there, you're going to need Tate to be the quarterback. And again, I don't want to dish on Tate at all, because he had a really good game last week, but you wonder how he's going to be able to perform when they have a week to prepare for him as a starter, assuming he probably is. And I'm sure right now with the way they played the injuries and Jordan moving, if Jordan can play, I think he's going to play along with the other guys. But you at least have the 50-50 game plan now for Jordan and Tate. And I think that you have to simplify the offense some for Tate. You have to give him one read, RPOs, and things like that. And given that they have kind of an NFL background on their defense, you may see them be able to scheme some things up to confuse him. And that's kind of where you're going to find your success, is get pressure on him and create some turnovers. And that could be something that could be worrisome if you see Tate start to spiral. But I do hope that maybe this last game showed him that he is able to do this on a big stage in a college football environment, and you hope that he can carry that forward and put together another solid performance if he is the starter. But like we said, so far you feel better about your backup situation now, but you want Jordan to be in the game if at all possible, because so far, like I said, you were feeding a 6'7" receiver who was in one-on-one coverage, and Louisville just refused to give him any help, and he took over the game, and they kept hitting it, and they wouldn't do anything about it, and so they just ran it until they won the game. And I think that it would be a little harder if they were to give some safety help on Johnny Wilson. I think you might bottle some things up on Tate. But again, I do think you feel better about what you've seen from Tate. But it was only like 6 throws. I mean, he was 6 to 10. He was 6 to 10 in that game. So I don't really want to put all my marbles into that basket yet. Now I do think you're going to need the starters. I think you're going to need them for that tough stretch coming up with Wake, and then you got NC State, you got Clemson. You got Miami on the horizon. You got a tough game against Syracuse, and obviously you end the year with Florida. So you're going to want your starters back for those games. But I do think, again, like I said, that's kind of the path for them. Is you hope Tate can play, you hope you can confuse him, and you hope you can get some plays with Zay Flowers. And really, I feel like if Florida State is at full strength, I don't give BC. I mean, of course you got a puncher's chance, but I don't really give them a chance in this game, or not much of one. If Florida State's running a depleted defensive line, if Florida State has their backup quarterback in, you could see a path to them sneaking up on Florida State. But I still think they get the win. If they have a majority of their starters back, I think they still win without them. I just think you're going to sweat it out a little bit more. For Florida State, I think your path to victory here is going to be dominate the trenches on both sides of the ball, because it's very much possible. I think you can completely, especially if you're at full strength, I think you can basically hold them to almost nothing on the ground. If you could keep them, follow the Virginia Tech game plan. Bottle them up on the ground, bracket, double coverage, take away Zay Flowers, and pressure Jerkovic and make them beat you through the air. And that's what Virginia Tech was able to do, and they held them to under 200 yards of offense, and they only scored 10 points. So I think that is a recipe for success. I'm sure they're going to watch that game film and see some of the things that they did. But so I do think, again, this is a big opportunity for Florida State. You could move to 4-0. You could get to, for the first time since 2015, you could move to 2-0 in conference play. You could get some recruiting momentum with a house full of recruits that night. You could get a big win in front of your fans, which is going to be 70,000 plus. You can just keep this momentum rolling going into a big game at home next week against Wake Forest. And again, like we talked about, I think if you have the guys available to play, I think they're going to play. And if they do, I like Florida State. This game, we said last week that Louisville felt like a race to 30 points. And it kind of was. I mean, 35-31. But to me, this one feels like if you can get over 20 points and you get a decent showing from your defense, you have a good chance of winning. I think with Jordan in the game at, not at least 90%, I think you're going to look at – I think Florida State could get in the mid-30s, 34, 38 points. You could even probably see them get hang a 40 on them, maybe 41, 42, something like that. And I do think that with Tate in the game, I still think you should have no problem getting 20 on them, especially if you can get your ground game going. I think you can really shut down Boston College's offense, and I think you can make some things happen there. So I think you can easily hold them under 20. We saw where Louisville scored 7 points in the first game, 20 points in the second game, and they got 31 on Florida State. So I know Cunningham's a different animal. I know they were depleted on defense, but you just always seem to be like, oh, well, they didn't score much in these two games, so surely Florida State will hold them. And then, boom, they get their highest point total of the season. So I don't really ever count a whole lot of that, but you would like to see Florida State hold them under 20. And if I had to throw a score on it, I would say if Florida State is back full strength, like say you get Verse back, you get Lovett back, and you get Jordan back, I think Florida State can win somewhere like 38-13, and you can get a comfortable kind of blowout win, one of your first blowout wins over a Power 5 team in a while. I think if Tate comes back, it's going to be a little closer than you want it to be, but I still think Florida State can win. I would take Florida State somewhere along the lines of 24-13, 27-10, somewhere in that area. Again, it's still going to be – I still think Florida State wins because I just think they're the better team, and I think they're going to be at home in a loud environment. I just like the setup for it. But like we talked about, Florida State can't overlook anyone. They have not earned that right. They have not been dominant enough to just roll in there, and just punch someone in the mouth and go on about their Saturday night. Like, they have to come out and play. They have to be ready for this challenge. And even against a kind of a bad Boston College team, but you also do have the opportunity to feast in front of you. And I think that's going to be the case. So either way, I think Florida State wins. We won't know much about who's going to start until Saturday, at kickoff, honestly, the way Norvell plays injuries. So, but like I said, I do think Florida State gets the win. I do think they end up 4-0 at the end of the night. But they just need to play well. They need to play clean, need to play well. And, if your starters are available, let them play and get you a big win before next week. If there's any risk of re-injuring something, I think maybe you hold them to in case of emergency type situation. But you also don't want things to get bad and then you yank Tate and you kill his confidence. But you also can't afford to lose this one. I mean, you drop a game at Boston College at home in front of a bunch of recruits who's 1-2 and looks terrible. Man, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. So I think you have to pull out whatever stops you need to get this win. But I also think you do realize that on the horizon, you have some games that could garner national attention for Florida State. But it all starts here because it's not really going to mean a whole lot if you drop a stinker to Boston College. So I do think Florida State gets the win, and I do think they will keep the momentum rolling. And so we'll just wrap it up here. I know we're a little bit over an hour. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you were able to take something from this episode and feel a little more prepared for the game on Saturday. If you guys are traveling to Doak, I hope you guys have a safe trip and really enjoy it. Make lots of noise for me. I will not be in attendance. I'm still not sure if my voice has recovered from the LSU game. I mean, I literally screamed my face off for 60 minutes or however long Florida State's time of possession was. I screamed my face off for the entire time, but I had a blast doing it. So that's the one thing. The one good thing about I do this as a hobby, as a passion of mine. I'm not credentialed media or anything like that. That's the goal someday, hopefully. But I still like to sit in the stands. I still like to be in the crowd. I still like to yell, do the war chant, mix it up. I like to do a little pregame and a little tailgating before I go in. So it's a good time, and I really wish I could be there for this one because I love night games. I mean, to me, a packed house at Doak at night, there's just no better environment in college football. There's no better tradition. It's such a loud stadium, and I just love night games. They're my absolute favorite. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you get to see a nice big win. I'll be watching at home, and hopefully I'll be able to knock out a instant reaction for you guys. I'm off this weekend. I'll be watching the game. So, again, you guys have fun. Enjoy. I'm excited for the opportunity and to get to see Florida State play again because this has become a really likable team, and you just cheer for them. You want to see them do good, and you just love watching them play now. So there's a lot of guys you can cheer for and root for. So all in all, I think it's going to be a nice, successful weekend. Hopefully we can add on to the recruiting momentum on Friday with Jaden Williams after getting the big commitment from Blake Nichelson. And maybe someone pops after the game. Maybe they see some things they like. There are going to be some FSU commits already there in attendance. So hopefully we can keep the momentum rolling recruiting. Hopefully they can keep the momentum rolling on the field. And then hopefully we have a big matchup coming to Tallahassee next week in Wake Forest. So, again, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for all your support. Go connect with us on social media and get in on the conversation. I would just love to hear from you guys. We do have a Facebook group now, Plant the Spear on Facebook. You can find it through our page. We'd love to have you guys in there just chopping it up with some like-minded people who just bleed garnet and gold and enjoy Florida State. So, again, appreciate you guys. Check out everything we do, and we'll see you guys on the other side. Thanks for listening, and go Noles.